Good evening and welcome to the Sound Off Show. My name is Linda Kirker. I host the program, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Maybe you can just sit back and relax after all the Christmas effort and enjoyment, I hope. It's been a busy time for me, and I'm assuming maybe for you as well. But we are blessed when we can get together. Actually, maybe many of us were not able to get together for one reason or another, but we still can carry on the spirit of the holiday. And we can look forward to the start of a new year just in a few days, and hope for the best, pray for the best, and work for the best going forward in this state, and encouraging those who represent us nationally to do the right things according to the will of the people. After all, you know, we are meant to be the ones who have the power in this country, and we elect people, hopefully, who will remember that and honor our wishes. So with that, I know it's a short intro tonight, but I'm excited to introduce my guest to you, who's been a guest on this show through the years, whenever I can get him. He's a busy man, but he's involved in a lot. He has a lot to offer us. He works hard in our state, and he provides a lot of important information to us when he comes on the show and elsewhere. So with that, I would like to introduce Rob Roper.
Hi, Linda.
Hi there, Rob. Welcome back.
Good to see you. I could barely hear you from across the room with the COVID social distancing that we're doing in the studio today.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
I can.
All right. I can try to project. I was a cheerleader many moons ago. And you're the president of the Ethan Allen Institute for how many years now?
I just finished my 8th year, so going on 9th year.
Wow, good for you.
Or did I just start my 8th year? I don't know. They're all starting to run together now.
Well, you know what? People like you, and sometimes myself, are so involved in so many things of importance, I'd like to think, that it's hard to keep track of everything, for me, at my age anyway. But I think one of the things that I've spoken with a few people about, just friends, people I meet too, about how important it is, no matter what your age, when you're old enough to realize that you can have a purpose in life. And I think, even at my age, I have a purpose in life. And I think that does something for you. It gives you motivation and makes you feel like you're contributing. And so, folks, doesn't matter how old you are, you can have an important purpose in life. So with that, is there anything you'd like to open with?
I'm kind of glad to see 2020
ending,
going into the rearview mirror, and it's been a weird year. It's been certainly a rough year. I mean, we focus on mostly economics and economic policy at the Ethan Allen Institute, and this has been a rough year for economics and economic policy. It's been a very strange year for constitutional policy, which is another area that we focus on very closely. I mean, with obviously the pandemic has wreaked havoc with
everything.
With economic policy, with people's household budgets, with businesses, but it's also raised a lot of constitutional questions too about how far can government go without breaching the Constitution and enforcing some of the safety precautions that they've put in place. So there's lots of strange things going on with that. I like to focus a little bit on some of the, I think, the good news that's come out of the pandemic. I think that there's some good technological innovations that have come about. I think that it's really good to see that with more people working from home, I hope that it will lead to a relaxation of regulations regarding independent contractors and allowing people to telecommute. Because the Vermont legislature has always been very hostile to people who don't conform to that really 20th century work model. We've got the 21st century that we're almost a quarter of the way through, or a fifth of the way through it. And the way people work and want to work. I mean, it's not just that, some people, I guess, you'd say, are forced into a sort of what they call the gig economy these days, where they don't have any options, so they drive an Uber. But there are a lot of places, a lot of people, and a lot of jobs where that's how you want to do it. You want to have, time for family. You want to have time for hobbies, and your work is sort of fit into that schedule. And if we want to attract more people who are coming here to Vermont because they're escaping COVID in New York City, and nobody wants to live in a little tiny 200 square foot apartment if you're quarantined in it for long periods of time. So come to the great outdoors. People are coming here. People are looking at Vermont. But if we want to keep them long term, then you better have some policies in place that allow them to
be free.
To be free. Exactly. That's exactly right. From a government standpoint, a couple of the positives that I see, what I really have enjoyed about, one of the things that we do at the Ethan Allen Institute is we try to cover what's going on at the legislature. And we're a small staff. We're, myself, John McClowery, and David Fleming make up the team. So it's hard to cover everything in the State House. But they've gone to Zoom. So now all the committee hearings and all of the floor actions are done on Zoom. And they're recorded and archived, whereas they weren't before. So in the old days, you had to be one of the lucky ones who could. You were in the legislature, Linda. You know how small those committee rooms are. You got a seat, but I was like the one usually perched up on the radiator by the window, trying to take notes. And if you missed what somebody said, then it was gone. It evaporated into the ether. And sometimes they said some pretty crazy stuff. So now that it's done on Zoom, anybody can watch and see what they're saying, and if you missed it, you can go back and play the recording and say, oh yeah, they really did say that. Or I misunderstood what they said the first time, and you can go back and you go back and sort of figure out what it is, so it really opens up participation to watch to a whole lot more people than just the lobbyists. And
is there one site that's used every day, or that they're in? Yeah,
well, I mean, I'm now subscribed to. Each committee has its own YouTube channel, but you can access them all through the legislative website. Because if you remember from your legislative days, on the website, it lists. You click committees, and it lists all of the committees, and you click on the committee, and then it takes to their agenda for the week and all that stuff. Well, on that page now, where it's the agenda for the week, you can click the address, and it takes you to the YouTube page where you can watch it live, or you can watch you could watch the recording.
That's good for the viewers to know.
It's great for the viewers to know. I hope more people will take advantage of it, and also the floor debate. I mean, it used to be there was no recording in the floor debate, and now. That's all archived there, so people can participate. And what I think is great, and I've had some debates with people about this, is, and there is some important stuff about having everybody come together in a building and get to know one another and shake hands and all that. And I don't want to minimize the importance of some of that. But a lot of what's going on in that, you were there. A lot of what happens of greatest import happens in the cafeteria, which really isn't the way government should happen. No. It's the lobbyists schmoozing, it's the press, whispering in ears, and that's where the arm twisting occurs and the glad handing. And that can't happen now. The lobbyists are the ones who have really taken a hit, because they can't schmooze in the hallways, they can't schmooze in the cafeteria.
interesting.
All of these legislators are now working from home amongst their constituents. So, you know, I think that on the whole, it will lead, if it hasn't already, to better, more transparent, more responsive government.
Well,
So
that would be good.
that's a positive. And my hope is that enough people, maybe some folks who are watching the show tonight, will tune into this, and once we get a vaccine, and God willing, we have enough immunity in the community where things can go back to normal, even though they'll be in the State House, I hope that the videotaping and the archiving and will continue as policy.
Yeah, and that'll be available hopefully through the years. I hope they will.
Yeah, no, I hope so too. I hope it becomes more interactive, where constituents can, you know, write
So
questions.
you just go to the Vermont legislature.
The Vermont Legislative webpage, and you go on to each committee. I forget where you find the link to the Vermont House and the Vermont Senate, but if you Google it,
It'll
it's really,
come up.
it's really, if you go, well, I shouldn't say Google it. If you go to YouTube and you search for it, it will, it's easy to find.
Well, with my new computer, I don't know if I'll find anything, but
Now you've come over to the good side. You've joined the good side with Mac.
oh boy, I've wanted to throw it out the window a few times. But I'm getting there slowly but surely. Yeah, I will check that out and see what I can find. Yeah, you bring up some good points. This virus has done a lot of damage to our society and to our government and so forth. But on the other hand, there can be positives. And when this first struck, I said, Lord, please, let there be, in the long term, let there be something really positive for this country that comes out of this.
Yep, there will be some. I mean, another great policy thing that's happened is they've made telemedicine much more widely available than it had been. And I think that you're seeing the need for more broadband and more rural areas, so people can access things like telemedicine. Now, telemedicine isn't great for everything.
No.
But there's certain things where if you can just sort of take a picture of I got a funny rash. Here's a picture of it, and you send it to your doctor, and then you can get diagnosed, or you can have a conversation, over whatever the medical equivalent of Zoom is, and I think that's going to get people better care over the long term.
Well, if you've tried it all, you know that it isn't easy to get an appointment these days.
No.
A one-on-one. I had one not long ago, and my doctor was over there, and I was here, and of course we were wearing masks. And so, I felt like I might as well not have been there. I could have spoken to her on the phone or whatever.
And I'm not an expert in this, but there were regulations that really discouraged that sort of thing. And now, because of COVID, because of what you just described, people don't want to leave the house. They certainly don't want to go into a place where people who are sick are coming together. It's allowed that to flourish a little bit more than it has, than it's been allowed to in the past. So things like that are speeding up.
Well, it's definitely a change of the approach, how we do things. And probably the telemedicine and the Zoom for legislation would not have happened.
No.
But for the virus.
Yep.
So maybe that can be a good thing.
Yeah, another good thing that I see coming of it.
What is it?
Is education. What we've seen with education, and this needs to be greatly modified. There have been good things and bad things exposed about education. One, for forever, we've had a disparity in outcomes between sort of upper income mainstream students and lower income special needs students in terms of educational outcomes. And it's because the public school system as it's set up doesn't work for lower income special needs kids very well. It works great if you've got a stable family and you've got parents at home who are helping you with your homework and making sure that you're, doing some reading over summer vacation and all that stuff. But the system as it's set up really doesn't work very well for those kids. And I think that what we've seen with this sort of breakup of schools because of COVID into pandemic pods. You see a lot of families are now trying to educate their kids in smaller groups, or just a couple of families getting together, using the internet as a tool, but also bringing in maybe a tutor to educate 6, 8 kids. One really interesting example that I need to follow up on to see how it went, Vermont Coffee Company under Paul
Coffee?
Vermont Coffee Company under Paul Ralston used to be a legislator. They're based out of, I think, if they're not in Middlebury, they're right near Middlebury. When COVID hit, they cleared out a portion of their office complex and turned it into a school for the for the children of the employees.
Wonderful.
And they hired a teacher, and they came in there, and what a great option. Now, what Paul was saying, it was what we need is, if we had some funding, if the money could follow the child from,
lots of luck with that.
And we could have, we could use that money to pay the teacher, to buy insurance, to maybe expand the space. What a great opportunity.
Yep.
I mean, you drive to work, your kids are in the car with you, you have a conversation about what's going to happen that day, you have lunch together. If there's a school play, you leave your office, you go down to see the play, you come back, you finish up your day. Those kinds of innovative ways to deliver education probably be more effective, probably over the long haul less expensive for the taxpayer. Mm-hmm. And when we're going to talk about that estimated 9% increase in property taxes, it ties in to these kind of reforms that I'm bringing up right now, because there's a lot of things, not just in Vermont, but the number of people who are homeschooling in Vermont has more than doubled over the previous year. It's over 4,000 kids now who are homeschooling. The number of people who are moving into private schools is bigger, and I'm sure that the number that number gets even bigger when you have kids who are still enrolled in the public school, but their parents have done something supplemental to that to make sure that they're getting what they need. Now, I have no doubt that kids are being left behind in this, and probably those kids who are most at risk. They're not getting put into a pandemic pod. They're given an iPad and told to tune in for a couple hours a day while the teacher talks to them through the computer, and I'm sure that's not working. So we need to make sure that the resources, the money following the child,
absolutely,
gets to those kids most, so they have the financial empowerment to start not only taking advantage of some of these innovative ideas, but creating them on their own. I think these parents are perfectly capable of that if they have the resources to do it and to put behind such ideas.
But you have the establishment, the union, teachers' union, and so forth, protecting the union, all right? They're not going to buy into the money following the child.
Oh, no.
And what happened here, not too long ago, was that we had quite a number of private daycares for the younger children. 3- and 4-year-olds, whatever. And all of a sudden, there were all these regulations and demands and costs that were involved. And a big number of those people said, forget it,
Yep.
No way. Well, isn't it interesting? What happened? The school opened up for 3- and 4-year-olds, all right?
Oh, that was a hostile takeover.
Of course it was.
It was a hostile takeover of small businesses run mostly by women, by the most powerful lobbying group in the state. And the reason that we've always had trouble with school choice, I think, is because most parents who are in the system say, well, it's kind of working for me, so I don't need to fight, I don't need to rock the boat. And most people don't have kids in the school, so they say, oh, well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't see any need to rock the boat. And there are just a few parents for whom this isn't working, and they'll make a stink, but the establishment is able to drag its feet long enough for those kids to leave the system, and their parents leave with them, and then the fervor dies down. But because of COVID, I think the system isn't working for anybody. And now everybody is looking for an opportunity to change it.
Well, this is a great opportunity for people to have the freedom to make the decisions on their own about how they want their children educated. And the more competition you have, generally speaking, the better the quality of what is offered becomes better because there's competition.
Yep.
And they want to win, okay? But we have, if I recall correctly, just after I got out of the legislature, it was 2005, we had 130,000 students in Vermont, K through 12. Now we're down to...
Well, the numbers I've seen, it was 106,000 in 1997 when Act 60 came into effect, and now we're down below 80,000 on
Oh, yeah, it's 70-some thousand.
Yeah, it's like 78, 77, something
So,
like that.
all right, say it was
So it's a lot. I mean,
30,000 or more.
Yeah,
we've lost. So why have the costs gone up?
Well, that's a darn good question.
Thank you.
I mean, they shouldn't have gone up.
No, but when you keep adding more services in the schools, more children, like 3- and 4-year-olds, it used to be 5 years old and up, all right? Now it's 3- and 4-year-olds. The schools can't be everything for everybody. They need to focus on the children who are capable of learning the things that they need to learn as they go through the school process, so that when they get out, they don't need remedial reading in college, like some of our students need. And I firmly believe, and I bet you do too, that education begins in the home. Teaching a child to sit still and to listen. All right?
Well, yes, it does. I agree with you in the home, and teaching a kid to sit still can be important, but some kids don't want to sit still, and that's why it's so important to have a different...
Then they don't belong in the classroom.
That's right. They don't belong in the classroom. They belong in some other learning environment where they can thrive, and that is why it's so important to have diversity of types of education out there.
That's right.
Because some kids are great at sitting down and paying attention to the teacher and focusing and learning. Other kids are running around and they're learning because they're hammering on nails into wood, and they're using measuring things and doing angles, and that's how they learn geometry and
figuring things out and
figuring things out, working in their hands. I mean, there's so many different ways to educate children, and there's no one right way. So you have to have a whole variety of ways, and we've got this horrible mindset.
But they don't all have to be in the school classroom.
No, they could be at the Vermont Coffee Company in a back classroom. They could be on a farm. There's so many different ways that you can educate children, and we should have a system that encourages the diversity of opportunities. And we're just in this wrong mindset that everything needs to be exactly the same, because if everything's not exactly the same, then it's not fair. Which is the opposite of fair, because if you take a kid who learns by running around and hammering things together and measuring and cutting and getting hands dirty, and you put them in an environment where they have to sit still, and that kid doesn't learn, that's not fair to that kid. It's not fair to all of that kid. It's not fair to the kid. It's not fair to the teacher who is teaching a certain way to a student who can't learn that way.
Well,
it sets both sides up for failure, and it's a terrible system to have.
I can tell you that if I had to sit in today's classroom in front of a computer all day, that would drive me nuts. I I want to hear what the teacher has to say. These teachers have gone supposedly to college to learn a specific specialty, whether it's U.S. history or math or science or English, whatever it might be. And I want to hear what the teacher has to say. Okay, sure, give me a little assignment and I can, spend a little time on the computer. But if I had my way, there wouldn't even be computers in the classroom.
But this does get to the point I wanted to bring up about the property tax, because this is something that we're going to be focusing on very closely at the Ethan Allen Institute.
Good.
Coming up is the tax commissioner has estimated there will be a 9% increase in property taxes for the next fiscal year. That they'll be putting that program together over the course of the next few months. The hope is that they can get that number down. They have in the past. This is just an estimate. But, they've kept property tax rates fairly stable over the past couple of years under Governor Scott, but they've used an awful lot of smoke and mirrors and accounting gimmicks in order to do it. And they've kind of shot their bolt on using one-time monies, using, shifting this to that, putting stuff off, tapping into reserves. So I don't know how they're going to do it. Maybe they'll figure out a way. But voters out there and citizens, and this is why I think we have a real opportunity to force some reforms, is the system, they're not even teaching kids. A lot of these kids, because of COVID, they're not even going into the classroom. It's going to be extremely expensive to keep this system in place, and it's not working. It's not working for the low-income kids and the kids with special needs, especially when you talk about equity issues. And as you pointed out, there have been a number of studies that have come out on readiness for college. And our students, everybody says we've got this great graduation rate for our high schools, and then they graduate and they don't complete college because they're not ready for college. So we have one of the highest high school graduation rates and one of the lowest college graduation rates, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Basically, we're sort of, the way I interpret it is we're sort of pushing kids through a poor system that doesn't prepare them for the next step up. We make it easy for them to go through K-12, and then when they hit college, they're not ready, and we're not serving them well at $20,000 a kid, which is a lot of money.
I think, yeah, it's at least that, yeah. Well, my understanding, I believe I read this in the paper, I might even have it with me, that the reason why they're offering up 9% as a potential increase for the property taxpayers is because that money is needed for the, $4.5 billion shortfall in the teacher, and I believe it's other government employees as well, health care and retirement system.
Yes.
Why are we paying that? I don't understand.
Well, we haven't been paying it. That's the problem.
But why are we responsible for that?
Well, whether you like it or not, an agreement has been made by people who you voted into office as the local school boards.
No, it took place a long time ago.
Well, yes, but I mean, people voted into office, the school board members and the other government officials who made these deals with the unions to pay for health care benefits, retirement benefits for teachers and municipal employees. And that's a contract agreement, and we have to keep it.
Is that for the state government employees too, or is that
all municipal, state and municipal? Wow. And teachers, and yeah, it's more than $4.5 billion now.
Well, that's more,
in unfunded liabilities. I mean, some of it's funded.
We don't have the money for it.
So we don't.
And I read,
but that's not part of the education fund. That's not part of that $20,000 per kid.
I think it's 40,000 employees that I read somewhere that we're responsible for covering. I think somebody needs to look at what is the percentage that these people who are getting this benefit from the hardworking people who probably earn less money than the government employees and teachers, people who are not making that much money but are forced to support these programs.
I think when people start to understand some of that dynamic, they're going to force. I think you have to keep the promises that you made to the people who are currently in the system, but there's an opportunity to start reforming it for the new people coming into the system. There's a lot of resistance from the higher ups in the unions over that. They want to maintain the kind of benefit structure that they have now, which is anachronistic. It's a defined benefit as opposed to a defined contribution, and we can't afford it. We can't afford to do it. So what's going to end up happening, if you're a rank and file union member out there, if you're a young person who's joining this and your union bosses are saying we need to keep this benefit, well, what's going to happen? Something that can't go on forever doesn't. You're going to lose all your benefits because bankruptcy is going to be, people are just saying we can't pay this, and we are absolving ourselves of the debt. And you're not getting nothing. Or you're getting less, or you might get, significantly less than you were promised. So if you want to maintain your benefits, you need to reform the system so that it can become sustainable. But again, this is the politicians in Montpelier who've dug us this hole because they don't want to put money aside for promises made because those are votes that have already been bought. I'll put it cynically. They want the money that they collect from you, they want to buy votes with. And that means spending it on something else, which is what they've done. They've played a lot of smoke and mirrors games with the pension funds so that they don't have to put as much money aside as they really should. It's become a lot more expensive to live here. And I received just recently some Christmas cards from, one was from friends in Arizona who say it's cheap to live there and they love it. And then from Tennessee, it's very inexpensive to live there too, compared to here. And so people, I have another friend who just moved to South Carolina. People are leaving. You say people are coming, but they better know what they're getting into. It's a beautiful, beautiful state. I love it in terms of the beauty, as long as they don't destroy it with windmills and solar panels. Because one of the biggest, and I've said this on the show before, one of the biggest sources of income for the state is tourism. And I want to know how many people are going to be touring Vermont if they have to look at our hillsides and our lovely orchards or fields, and they're loaded with solar panels. They're going to say, what is this? Why did we come here? So we have to think about what we're letting go of, what we're destroying. If you own a private property and you want to put a solar panel system on your yard, that's your business. And I suppose I'm defeating my own statement here because unless the government buys property and puts the solar panels on it, but there's something that's been recent too, and that is, I don't know if it's a bill yet, but the discussion about all of the natural resources in the state belong to the state. So if you happen to have natural resources on your private property, guess what? It's not a bill. It's a proposed constitutional amendment.
Okay.
Put forward by a senator from Madison County named Christopher Bray and a number of other, I think a majority signed on to it. And it's insane. It says all the natural resources in the state belong to the state. So, I mean, that's the trees on your land, that's the soil on your land, that's any mineral deposits on your land. I mean, it's any animal.
If there's a little brook running through it.
If there's a brook, it's the water on your land. It's all your land, basically. So it would be the end of private property. Now, it wasn't taken up in the last biennium, and hopefully so it died. Hopefully it goes away forever. But we've talked about a lot of good things, and I want to talk about some of the other good news.
Go for it.
Some of the other good news that we had in 2020, and then maybe with some of the remaining time, talk about what we can expect in 2021.
Okay.
And one really good piece of news that we had is that Vermont decided not to participate. And when I say Vermont, I mean Governor Phil Scott decided not to participate in the Transportation Climate Initiative, which is called TCI. And for the viewers who aren't familiar with that, the Transportation Climate Initiative was essentially a regional carbon tax that was going to be placed on gasoline and on-road diesel fuel. Estimates were anywhere from, start small, maybe 5 cents a gallon, but growing to at least 17. One estimate by Tufts University said that it would have to go up to 38 cents per gallon in order to attain the greenhouse gas emission reductions that laid out in the bill, or laid out in the proposal. It's not a bill. I shouldn't say that. It's a proposal. There were 12 states plus the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. were asked to participate in this. They've been negotiating it for many years, and in earnest over the past year, they came out with a draft memorandum of understanding that the states have been contemplating since for about a year, maybe a little less than a year. And they came out with their final memorandum of understanding on the last day of fall, on December 21st. And thankfully, not just Vermont, but only 3 states in the District of Columbia out of the 12 states and District of Columbia that were contemplating participating in this boondoggle, only 3 states decided they would actually sign on.
Fantastic.
So, and it was Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Washington, D.C. New York did not opt to participate. New Jersey did not opt to participate. Pennsylvania opted not to participate. And the reason I mentioned those states, and New Hampshire not only opted not to participate, they said they didn't want anything to do with it anymore. I'll get to, this is the good news, and I'll get to the bad news in just a second. But what's good about that is New York and, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Albany, New York, Quebec, which obviously can't participate in this because it's not a state, it's part of a foreign country. Those are the places where we buy our gasoline from. Those are the terminals where we buy our gasoline from. If those states had participated, they could have been de facto taxing the gasoline that came into Vermont, and we would have to pay the increase. But since they're not participating, and that was the argument that the Vermont Public Interest Research Group and other advocates were saying, was, well, if Vermont doesn't participate, then we're going to end up paying more for gasoline anyway, and we won't get any of the money back. Because the way TCI would work is they would force these terminals to purchase carbon credits in order to sell gasoline to you. And that cost of that credit would be passed along to first the distributor, and then the distributor to you at the gas station when you fill up at the pump. So if Albany had to pay for these credits, by the time it trickled down to you in Vermont, you'd be paying more for gasoline because of the credit. But and the VPIRG folks were saying, well, see, if they tax it on Albany, you're going to pay. And then what TCI would do is they'd take the money that they would get from selling those credits, take their cut, and then hand the money back to the states as what was so cleverly called off-the-books revenue.
Well, there's too much government in too many aspects of our lives. Let the private sector do its thing, private enterprise, that's how this country started. Let them thrive and provide the services and the goods for the people who want to purchase them. But government has to get out of, I often say this, folks, I hope you're not tired of hearing it, but I hope you agree with me. I want the government off my land, out of my house, out of my car. Leave me alone.
Yes. I agree with that sentiment. But here's one thing that I've got to point out about Transportation Climate Initiative, though. It's not a government tax. TCI is a concept, the carbon credits. It's also an organization founded by a bunch of people from Georgetown University. And it's a private, you've heard all about, these wacky financial schemes cooked up on Wall Street. This is basically a derivative product. This carbon credit is a financial product created out of thin air that people will have to buy in order to, and they're going to have to buy it from this private entity. Now, the private entity will have an agreement with the states to collect the money from the carbon credits and then give it back as if it were a tax. But the politicians get to say, oh, it's not a tax. It's this weird thing. So the good news is that Vermont and all those other states decided not to do it. The bad news is that Vermont and all of the non-participating states, except New Hampshire, have decided to stay at the table and continue discussing the possibility of joining TCI at some point in the future. So, we as citizens have to be vocal about this, because this is it's a terrible idea.
Okay, so are you suggesting then that the citizens, the viewers of this show, and people who read newspapers and so forth, reach out to our legislators?
Yeah, there's a possibility that the same Senator Christopher Bray of Addison County, who was putting forward that constitutional amendment to eliminate private property rights in the state of Vermont, is chairman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate, and he is talking about putting forth legislation that would mandate the governor sign the MOU.
Mandate?
Yes, which we'll see if that flies. But there are people who really want to force you, the Vermont driver, to pay a whole lot more for gasoline. And it makes so little sense to do such a thing in the wake of COVID-19, when our economy is going to be struggling to get back on its feet, when people with their household budgets are going to be struggling to get back on their feet, to saddle them with what would essentially be a $90 million state tax on motor fuels. We're a rural state. People depend on their cars to get to and from work.
Absolutely.
People depend upon their vehicles for work. If you live out in the hinterlands, as a lot of people do in the state of Vermont, you need your car to get to the grocery store and back. And to make people pay more for what is really a necessity in a place like Vermont, but it's a necessity anywhere, but especially in a rural state like Vermont, it is just cruel. It's a terrible policy, and it makes no sense.
It's about power and control, and it's not about freedom and opportunity for the people, for the individual. It is about taking over our lives and controlling us. And folks, nothing will change if we don't stand up and speak out, fight back. It is time, it is past time that we realize we have children. It's not just for us. We have children, we have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and we need to fight back so that they eventually, if this pattern continues with so many aspects of our lives, whether it be health care, One Care Vermont, all right? Mm-hmm. And schools, and you name it. We cannot allow this to continue, because freedom is going to walk out the door, and we're going to say, what happened? Well, guess what? You didn't pay attention, you didn't speak out, you didn't fight back, and so what are our children and our grandchildren going to be left with, let alone what we have to deal with in our daily lives? It really frightens me. It's a whole different life from when I was growing up. Granted, that was a long time ago, but the changes, many of the changes, are not positive for the individual. So there. Let me see. Scott administration relaunches electric vehicle incentive program. Would you like to speak to that?
I'm not a big fan of subsidizing anything, really.
Nearly $1 million in new funding now available.
And here, again, this is what the Transportation Climate Initiative was supposed to do, is fund, create this big pool of money that states could use on things exactly like that, subsidizing electric vehicles, building electric vehicle charging stations. And I don't have anything against electric cars. The technology in some respects is pretty cool, but
If you
allow
want
them
it-
to develop on their own within a market. If people want to buy them, they'll buy them.
Exactly.
And as they improve, I think more people will buy them. But trying to force these vehicles down people's throats. And forcing one of the things that was great about this TCI, one of the reasons why New Jersey, I mentioned what New Jersey is a very liberal state.
I grew up there.
It's a very liberal state, and one would have thought that they would have jumped on Transportation Climate Initiative, but one of the reasons they didn't is because their minority communities spoke out about it and said, this is nuts.
They had a voice.
They spoke out, and they spoke out loudly, and they basically called the Transportation Climate Initiative racist. They said that it's been tone deaf at best and racist at worst, and what this is, it's a scheme for making, by what did they say? There was a woman from one of the social justice groups said this is a way for rich white people to get poor brown people to subsidize their electric cars.
Oh, for heaven's sakes!
And I think that's what killed it in California. It killed it in New Jersey. Is the politicians said we're not touching this thing.
Wow.
But that is what these electric vehicle subsidies are. They're making poor, low-income people subsidize the electric cars. It's welfare in reverse. Mm-hmm. Subsidize electric car purchases from people who could maybe not otherwise afford it, but aren't as low down on the income scale, and in many cases could afford it. There was Vermont Public Radio actually did a really interesting series called "Did It Work?" or something like that. I think it was "Did It Work?" Mm-hmm. And which was a great idea to go back and examine government programs, because when they're launched, you hear all the hype. We're going to save.
You're back.
Yeah, we're going to save this program. This program's going to pull all these kids out of poverty. This program's going to do that. Well, they did one on an electric vehicle subsidy program to get low-income people to buy electric vehicles. And if my memory serves, and I might be wrong, but it's something like this, that 78 vehicles were sold under this program, 3 of which actually went to low-income individuals. The rest went to middle and upper-income individuals. So it's not helping low-income people who are paying the gasoline taxes, who would be paying the TCI, in quotes, carbon tax, to pay for these subsidies. You see the same things with solar panels going on people's houses. It's not low-income people who are...
Are they being subsidized too?
Are low-income people? They would be, but they don't.
No. Huh? The solar panels.
Yes, they're tax incentives for putting a solar panel on your house.
We're subsidizing those as individuals, taxpayers?
Yes, in some cases as taxpayers, in some cases as ratepayers on your electric bill. We have the net metering program.
Leave me alone, for crying out loud.
We have the net metering program in Vermont, whereas if you put the solar panels on your house, then the power company is obligated to buy the power that you sell back through the grid. Well, who's paying for that more expensive electricity to the person who put the solar panel on the house? That's another kind of subsidy, a welfare and reverse subsidy that we have through all these programs, and it's not a good way for the market to do business.
Well, the state has a goal by 2025. The state wants to have 50,000 electric vehicles on Vermont roads. Now, who's going to pay for those?
Which is insane, because right now I think there's around 3,000. So how do you...
In 5 years, they want...
So I don't remember when the Prius came out, but it's been a while. since the Prius came out. And we've spent a lot of money, like that article about the Scott administration putting $1 million into the electric vehicle subsidies. We've had electric vehicle subsidies. We've had them through Green Mountain Power. We've had federal, at the federal level, I think it's something ridiculous. It's like $7,000 subsidy if you buy an electric car.
Really?
Yeah, it's a lot. And for all of that effort, over all of these years, we've got, I think it's around 3,000, and that may be high. I forget if it's just over 3,000, but I think it's just under 3,000, like 2,700 electric vehicles on the roads in Vermont. So how are you going to get from 3,000 to 50,000 in 5 years? Can you imagine the amount of tax money it would take to get 50? We're 600,000 people. The state is 620,000 people. 50,000 cars. That's like one out of every 4 or 5 households would have to have an electric vehicle. That's just not going to happen. And the infrastructure necessary, we don't produce enough electricity to charge all these cars.
That's right.
So nobody's thought about that. There was a study done just this past year about it would cost $1.2 billion just to build out the infrastructure for the grid for enough electricity to charge all of those cars.
And what electricity would they be using? Wind and solar? Or are they going to be using the power that we currently use?
No, I mean we don't have enough power. You'd have to buy power from Hydro-Quebec. You'd have to build wind or solar.
And who's going to pay for that?
Yeah, again, that's part of the $1.2 billion.
Where did they get all these great ideas that end up subsidizing VPIRG and all these other entities? Let them be a private enterprise.
Yeah.
Let them, if there's a market, the vehicles will sell. If there's not a market, then that's too bad. You have a product, you want to sell it, let the market do its thing. But to force the workers, the taxpayers, the retirees to subsidize these things is nonsense. We have enough expenses in this state. So there.
We certainly do.
Anyway, let's see, what else? What about the Climate Council? 23-member unelected Climate Council.
Well, they're the ones that are going to be pushing on a lot of this. As you know, at the end of the last session, the legislature overrode Governor Scott's veto of the Global Warming Solutions Act. So we have established a climate council. I watched their second meeting. I watched a little bit of the first one. It was just kind of introductions. The second one, they started getting into the meat. 4 hours long. Wow. And this is why I love Zoom, because if I had to sit there and watch that whole thing in the room for 4 hours straight, I would have blown my brains out before the end of it being over. But this way, I could watch it in segments. I'd ride my exercise bike, get some exercise, and watch it, take my notes.
Good for you.
In 45-minute chunks. But these are folks with an agenda.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that agenda is tied into conflicts of interest. A lot of them
lining their own pockets.
A lot of these people work in industries that would be subsidized by we need to weatherize more homes throughout the state. Well, Joe Schmo on the council, who is in that business, is certainly going to vote in favor of doing that. So that's one thing that the Ethan Allen Institute will do in 2021 is we have to keep a very close eye on this council. As you mentioned, the goal is by 2025 to be, I think it's 25% below our 2005 greenhouse gas emissions. And then by 2030, we are supposed to be 50% below our 1990 greenhouse gas emissions, and by 2050, we're supposed to be 80% below 1990 levels.
Well,
and those are, I mean, again, it's like, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to put 50,000 electric vehicles on the road. That's just insane to think that you're going to be able to do some of these things. And if you are able to do them, I mean, this lockdown, this economic lockdown that we're experiencing, is going to seem like a picnic, because they're going to have to lock down the economy. That's the only way that they can reach these goals. How are they going to do it? Are they going to ban, it's mostly the transportation sector and it's the heating sector. And you can see some of this going on in Burlington.
Heating, okay.
You can see some of this going on in Burlington, where they're outlawing fossil fuels to heat homes. That's not going to go well. They've got a cost of housing problem in Burlington, and yet they're going to put in this regulation that says you can't heat a home with a fossil fuel without paying this huge fine.
That's terrible.
And that's going to drive up the cost of housing.
Where's the freedom for the individual? There are all these things being forced upon us by government entities who that are being pushed by people who are going to benefit from these programs, the ones who initiate the programs and market them and make the products. They're looking out for their own best interest. But my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the state of Vermont has the second lowest carbon footprint in the nation. We have all these forests that absorb whatever carbon, not all of it, but...
Well, Tom Evslin, who's a brilliant guy, he was served in I believe, the Douglas administration. Maybe.
I've heard the name before.
But he was sort of when we had the bailout after the 2008 recession. He was in charge. He was the czar in charge of how to handle all that money for the Douglas administration, and a brilliant guy. And he did the calculations on Vermont's forests, and our forests actually take more carbon out of the atmosphere than all of our housing and cars and electric generation put in. We're what's called a carbon sink. So we're doing our part. Everybody said, "Oh, we've got to show that we're doing our fair share." We're actually doing more than our fair share.
Yeah.
We as a state, as an entire entity, are taking more carbon out of the atmosphere than we put in. So why are we spending all this money? I mean, Mark Higley, who serves as a representative who serves on the House Energy and Technology Committee, did a rough audit. Very rough audit on how much we spend on all these climate initiatives, and it's somewhere between $220 million and $260 million. That is more than we spend. That's twice as much as we spend on our roads, our roads need some work.
Yes, they do.
It's we spend $260 million. We spend it's 1/10. We spend 1/10 of that on our state college system, which is collapsing.
Yes.
So where are the priorities here? I mean, we're a carbon sink. It's like we're a student that gets an A in environmentalism, but we're failing on jobs, we're failing on taxes, we're failing on education, we're failing on this, and we're putting all of our effort into getting that A up to like an A+. And we're forgetting all of the other stuff that's going on over here that really needs our attention badly.
The basics. We need to focus on the traditional basics. And if these people who want all these environmental things, I don't believe in global warming anyway. I don't think it's man-made if there is global warming. I believe that it just makes sense to me to believe that nature will do its thing. And I understand that there are gases and things that are produced, but nature takes care of that, at least in Vermont it does. And so Vermont doesn't need to be doing all of these maneuvers to make it more difficult for the people. Does that say 1 minute and 20 seconds?
Yeah, we're almost at the end.
Oh my gosh! Well, you're going to have to come back because there are so many things to talk about. But we did cover a lot, Rob. Any last minute thing you want to say?
Well, I'll say, since we didn't get to finish our conversation, that you can learn more at the Ethan Allen Institute's website at ethanallen.org.
Good.
Conversations like this, my friend Bill Sayre and I have we have a radio show that we host on WDEV, which is 11 to noon on weekdays, but recently the governor's been preempting us. for his press conferences on COVID. So Bill and I have been doing a Facebook Live version of the radio show online. So if you go to our Facebook page, you can see a conversation like this every Tuesday and Friday from 11 to noon, or in this age of Zoom, it is recorded and you can watch watch it backdated. So we've been talking a lot about Transportation Climate Initiative, Global Warming Solutions Act.
Fantastic.
Lots of good stuff like that. So check us out. EthanAllen.org is the website, and just search Ethan Allen Institute on Facebook and you'll find us there as well.
It's a great resource, folks. Happy New Year coming up. I'll see you again next week. Have a great week. Stay healthy. Stay away from the COVID virus. And Rob, thank you so much once again. Good night, folks. Have a good week.